This is Michelle Green with the Office of E-Learning, and I am excited to welcome you to our first of the Indiana Digital Learning Month Geekouts. And a Geekout is a Google Hangout on Air, which many of you are familiar with Google Hangouts, and so this is being broadcast. I've invited a panel of teachers, who's your educators, to come in and share with us ideas around a topic related to digital learning. And we'll come back to that in just a second. But this is the first in a series of 10. So hopefully our style will become more polished as we go along, but this is a great learning opportunity, and that's just something really important when we talk about digital learning, being willing to jump out there and try new things. And so I really appreciate everyone who is joining our panel, especially those who are doing their first Google Hangout on Air Live. And so today's topic is introducing social media in the classroom. We're going to talk specifically about the concepts and the different ideas behind why you would do this, the potential for transforming learning in the classroom. And then again, we're going to bring this topic back on the official Digital Learning Day, the National Day, March 13th, and that particular Geek Out will include teachers with their students. And so very excited to have that group come in and do this. But today we're going to hear just some, from teacher perspective, some practical advice and some possible ideas for how we can start using social media in the classroom. And I put together some questions for our panel, and they're not all quite here yet, so if you see others pop in, we'll come back and get them. But let's go ahead and start introductions. And I'm afraid that Janelle McLaughlin is with us, and it doesn't look like she has, oh good, there, okay, was that Molly that said good afternoon everyone on chat? Okay, so Janelle, if you can open your chat, we'll be able to see that. So you're welcome to introduce yourself in that method, but for some reason we're not able to get her audio. There we go, she's saying hi. So let's start with Tim, and we'll work our way back. Tim Mohammed, so glad you're here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. It's nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I'm an Innovation Curriculum and Technology Specialist, or ICATS, for the Evansville Vanderburg School Corporation. So I work with teachers from K through 12 to find meaningful ways to use technology in the classroom. But of course, I started out as a teacher, my first love, and I taught for 15 years in a language arts classroom in 2 separate high schools.
Fantastic, thank you. And another language arts teacher, Molly Yao. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Molly Yule. I am a teacher at Danville Community High School, but I also work as a grant coordinator with the Office of E-Learning and Michelle and the rest of the team, and my focus is on digital content curation, and so I teach a period of dual credit college courses here at Danville in the morning, so I still have my foot in that door because it is fun. Like Tim said, it's the first love, and then I work the rest of the day with teachers and administrators across the state and trying to provide resources to all of our great Indiana educators.
Great. And I'm so sorry because you know I'm absolutely butcher your name every time. I should know better.
Sorry.
Janelle's back with us again. I don't know if audio's working now. Sounds like it. Great.
Oh, there we go.
You want to tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're here today to talk? Because your tweet yesterday is actually what made me reach out to you. You shared a fabulous article about blogging in the schools, or not blogging, I'm sorry, using social media in schools. And I said, you know, we need to invite her into the panel. So you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. And I'm sorry, can you guys hear me? There's tons of background noise here. Yes. Is it okay?
Just tell us you're in Starbucks so we can all be jealous.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not actually getting to partake in the Starbucks, so you can be jealous, and I just have my water with me. But a little bit about me, I taught for 13 years, and then the last 3 years I was a district administrator as the curriculum director for my school district. And that is really where I dove into the world of social media as a learning tool, was in my curriculum director position. Prior to that, I taught second grade, and I just hadn't been exposed to what I could do with that in the classroom at that point. I quit last spring to finish my administrator's license, and so right now I'm subbing until admin positions open up. So that is where I am. That article was just an example of something that I found via social media, actually through a group that I'm part of in LinkedIn. And so that just shows how much I utilize social media for my own growth and my own professional development.
What a great example. Thank you so much. When our fourth person that was going to speak with us today is Dr. Thomas Ho, and he is not in just yet. I'm not quite sure what's going on, but if he pops in, we'll come back to him and give him a chance to tell us a little bit more about his background. And I love that we have different perspectives. Dr. Ho is a tech director, if you would. We have a curriculum director. We have a tech integration specialist. We have a teacher who has kind of worked with all of those aspects and is currently working with her students in this field. And so it'll be really interesting to hear the different perspectives as we go through this. For anyone who is watching, we just had a viewer who disappeared. Oh well, they'll maybe come back. But anyone who's watching, we welcome your questions. You can ask your questions using the Q&A box that is on the screen. Just click that little blue button, type it in, and I'll see that. Or you can tweet to us using the hashtag #INELearn, and we'll make sure that we give our panelists a chance to answer your questions. So when you think about social media, we'll go back to Tim and start with our first question. What would you consider your first tool that you used, and when did you realize that social media could actually enhance your learning?
My very first social media tool would have had to have been Blogger, actually. I was in the classroom still, and I was looking for, honestly, I was looking for a way to have a learning management system before we had a learning management system. And so I wanted some means to communicate with my students outside of class to kind of go beyond the bell. And Blogger gave me that opportunity, and I quickly realized that it was less about posting content and less about creating broadcasting information, I guess, and more about the conversation that suddenly started to happen. And I was stunned at how quickly my students took to just communicating online with each other, with me, and ultimately with the world. And the power of that just blew me away. And so from that point on, I think I realized that social media was going to play a big role in education.
Great, thanks, Tim. And Tom, so glad that you're here with us now. You want to say hi to the group? I'm thinking maybe not the audio yet, so we'll give him a second to get his audio hooked up, and then maybe he can do a quick introduction and we'll tackle that first question. Molly, what would you consider your first social media tool?
I would say, this is only my second year back in the classroom after like 2 or 3 years out doing tech integration business. So last year when I came back into the classroom, LMSs were like really running strong and there were a lot of options. And so along with using Twitter in my classroom to communicate with my students and just send them, quick tweets saying, oh, we missed you in class today kind of stuff, or, congrats on the big game victory last night. I use my big campus in my classroom because that's our adopted LMS here. And it has kind of that social media feel very intentionally on the my big campus developers' part. So we definitely took advantage last year of some discussion features and some communication tools that they have within that, and allowed kids to communicate, 24/7. Allowed me to send them messages that they would receive, throughout the day and the evening. So I would say that, along with Twitter, has been the tool that I've used the last 2 years.
I don't know if anyone else is hearing the drumming.
Band practice is going on.
Yeah, I think I just muted Tom. I'm sorry, Tom, but I think that might have been coming, unless there's a band in Starbucks that I didn't know about.
No drums going on here.
Okay.
We're in the guidance office, so we don't practice here usually.
Okay. So, I'm so sorry about that, Molly. I'm glad you brought up My Big Campus. I mean, Tim mentioned Blogger as his first social media tool, and we don't often, we kind of get hung up on Facebook, Instagram, all of those types of predominant. Well, not that Facebook is predominant with kids anymore, but those predominant social media, and we forget that Blogger and YouTube are those same tools, and they allow us to do just that, communicate, and that's the whole point of social media. So I'm glad that you brought up the learning management system and made that correlation of that walled garden and the idea that you can create another place that is similar to you might see from other. I'm trying to work on my adjustments here. Sorry, Dr. Oh, some more volume again. But anyhow, love that you use that example. Janelle, what would you consider, you mentioned LinkedIn, and obviously I know that you're on Twitter. What would you consider your first social media tool, and how did you start seeing it as a learning device?
I actually would have to combine Learning Connection and Twitter, probably around the same time. And again, I'm embarrassed to say that as a classroom teacher, I really used very little technology in my classroom with my second graders. It would be totally different now. But when, in 2011 is when I became curriculum director, and and I was the very first one in our district, so it was a lot of learning as I go. And I kind of embraced Twitter and Learning Connection at the same time as learning tools for myself. Prior to that, I had just gotten on Learning Connection in 2010, but it was when I became curriculum director and I started finding all the different communities that I needed to belong to so that I could stay on top of everything for my district. And then that's also when I created my Twitter account. And in the beginning of Twitter, my Twitter usage, it was a lot of lurking. But that's actually when I started seeing the learning potential from it, because I found all kinds of great articles, great blogs that other professional educators were doing. And that's when I started finding the learning potential behind social media. Just the excitement that I could find what I wanted as far as professional development goes when I wanted to do it. It was just PD on my own schedule. And that's what I like the most about it.
Absolutely. Tom, I see that you've muted yourself. Do you want to try audio again and see if you can say hello to the group? Okay, so just so that we continue to move, it sounds like a lot of you have already kind of identified yourselves as digital learners, and I love the different things that you've talked about. I think any of us who look back, I look back at what I was doing in the classroom 5 or 6 years ago, and I kind of cringe because it really was not what I would be doing now, and it's a matter of not knowing what you don't know. And so we all kind of demonstrate different ways that we're digital learners. So let's talk about perceptions. So obviously we've all embraced to some degree the idea of using social media for learning. There are a lot of stakeholders who have not yet seen that as social media as a meaningful learning tool. How do you think how can you help people overcome that challenge, that barrier, if you would? Tim?
I think a big part of this is that learning in general is so social, and so if you can help people to understand that any tool that enables social interaction by its very nature enables learning, that's a good first step, and that all has to come through conversations. I work every day with teachers who are at different places on that path. Some people my daughter's first grade teacher uses Remind and Facebook and Twitter, and she has a Weebly website, and she communicates. I've never been communicated with so much from one of my children's teachers, and she's fantastic. And she's a master teacher who is, she's not who you would think. She's a veteran teacher, probably towards the top of our list of teachers in terms of longevity. But so you have those teachers, but then you have teachers who are not down the path at all, and I find that oftentimes what holds them back is the first, the fear, the sort of not what they don't know scares them, right? And they've heard horror stories about what happens in the social media world. But then also, the other thing that I think holds them back is that a picture hasn't yet been painted for them. We haven't connected that learner with my daughter's teacher so that they can see the impact that that type of learning has. And that all comes, I think, through just having conversations. And I've noticed a dramatic shift this year in terms of that conversation at a district level. We have many more teachers who are embracing social media as part of their workflow than we did last year.
Excellent. And I hope to actually have Evansville teacher with us on the 13th, on March 13th, sharing, because I know there are a number of teachers who are involved with their students, not necessarily just their parent communication, but really having their students communicate with them. And I've had the privilege of sitting on a panel with a group of students who have done that with their teacher, and hope that they can share their perspective with us as well. Molly, you're a great example of a teacher who not just communicates with the parents, but also communicates with her students via social media. Even though it's a little informal, can you share with us how you got started and what you're seeing out of that?
Yeah, I typically, just to go back to the parent real quick, because I'm teaching a dual credit course, the communication with parents this year is a little bit different because it's pretty much hands-off. This is a college course, and we don't talk about grades and things like that typically, as we treat them as an adult college student. And so my communication with my parents has actually been more limited this year, typically just through like our student management system and email if I need to, but really putting that responsibility on the kids. But with that, I have found that the kids, I think, are taking a little bit more responsibility on knowing that those are kind of my expectations. And so I thought that more than ever in this class, because the responsibility that is on their shoulders, it was so important to kind of build that rapport with these kids. They're seniors, most of them, so they're young adults preparing themselves, to go out and kind of this realistic kind of world, as we keep talking about preparing them for, and the communication responsibility that comes with that. And so, I'm big, I guess no matter what my classroom is, on building those relationships. And so my students call me old because, I use Facebook personally, like to stay in touch with my friends and family, and clearly they're not on that anymore, and I always laugh and I say, Facebook was created when I was in college, and it was just for college kids, and so we laugh about how long it's been around and how they don't use it anymore. And so I said, well, I think last year with my freshman, I was like, well, what are you guys on? Like, what do you use, to communicate? And and a year ago, Twitter was still pretty popular, and I think it is still among some of them. But I do have a lot of my students on Twitter, just having personal accounts. And so I thought, okay, to continue to build my rapport with these kids, I'm going to, tweet them a quick message, give them praise, give them reminders, tell them happy birthday. Today I had a student from last semester it was her birthday, so I sent her a tweet, and, I had a kid that was missing and wasn't feeling well and had to do swim trials, and I was like, do your best, whatever, and just sent her a quick message or a quick tweet, So it's a way to communicate with them in kind of a personal way, but it's still in this like public arena where, everyone can see it. So that's good for two reasons, because they kind of get public accolades, I guess, if I'm telling them good job on something, and a lot of my kids, I think they feel good about that because they'll like retweet it, and so I think they think it's cool that like their teacher tweeted to them, or maybe they're making fun of me, I'm not sure. But then also, it is a very public arena, because in the past I probably would have sent them an email, because we use Google Apps for education, and I might have just sent them an email. But, there's a lot of discussion about, teacher-student communication and emails and, that information being public. And I thought, well, this is like, you can't get more public than this. So if I send a tweet up, everyone can see the communication and that it's appropriate, but I'm still building that rapport with those kids. And it's just kind of a fun way to communicate with them. I send reminders. And not all of my kids are on Twitter, so, I post it in my big campus, but I'll also post it on Twitter, at the same time as I'm thinking about it. Just, hey, reminder, papers are due tomorrow, whatever. So I just think, I don't know, for some reason I think they like that I am on Twitter and tweet to them, and they follow me, and I just warn them that they're going to get a lot of lame education stuff, but every now and then they find stuff that is relevant to them. So it's kind of neat how it has changed my relationship with these kids throughout the school year. Just through, there's probably 10 or so that are on Twitter consistently, and you kind of feel a little bit more connected even to them because of the communication that you experience, publicly on social media. So it's kind of fun.
Well, we all know that our relationship with learners is vital to their success. So that's a really great point. And I love that you brought up the transparency, security concerns, that right there you've addressed that barrier that so many have.
Yeah.
So I'm going to switch over to Janelle, because as a curriculum specialist, you have kind of a different perspective. What would you say helps you as from that perspective, as the curriculum driver, why does social media still make sense? Does it have a real bad rap as being a time waster, or like kind of a fluffy type of feel-good activity?
It does have a bad rap, I think, mostly from teachers that are still new at it themselves. I think teachers that have embraced it for their own personal learning see how it can play a part in the classroom, and they've already integrated that. So I think it goes back to what Timothy talked about in the beginning, is just having these conversations and meeting people where they're at. I know like I shared already, I was super excited just to be able to do my own professional growth when I wanted to, and it was free. And then I could pass it on to the people that I wanted to share with. And I met a lot of barriers with teachers that did not want to do anything on their own time. And that was shocking to me, because I think if you care about your profession, then you should be willing to read a 15-minute blog post on your own time. Now, I had other teachers, though, that would eat up anything I sent to them. So again, it depends on readiness level. For me as a curriculum director, just in how I could support teachers, I found that it helped more if I kind of vetted different resources first and sent it to the appropriate people, instead of sending it out to all K-12 teachers, an article that I thought would be good. Even if I thought everybody could handle it and could learn from it, I still would try to pinpoint the few people that I knew would, one, either use it, two, needed it the most and had actually already talked to me about needing some more resources. Or if it was a departmental or a grade level thing, I would push it out to the whole department or grade level, knowing that one or two people would drive that for the rest of their team. So social media, to me, was just a great way to communicate and get resources beyond just my own words, because we know that it helps to have other people back up what you're preaching to the teachers at this point. So I just used it a lot as resource and reference and just a learning tool, not just for myself, but for the teachers I worked with. And I have to say, not just teachers, administrators, I had to go with first, because if I wanted the teachers to pick up on it and run with it, the administrators had to back me up. And so just like teachers, they're all at different levels, and I had to several times go and actually click on the link for people when I sent them a Google document to share because they couldn't figure out how to open it. So, I mean, that one was a superintendent. So you've got all different levels of people, and you just go with where they are and build from there.
I really liked Janelle. Oh.
Go ahead, Molly. I'm sorry.
I was just going to comment on when Janelle started and introduced herself. She talked about how she started on Twitter and she was like a lurker. And I think a lot of people are like that, and I think that's definitely how you kind of meet people where they are, because you're going to have those teachers that are hesitant or don't really see value. And so just by saying, just watch, sign up, follow 5 people, and, just watch, and then go from there. So it is just being patient and helping them see the value in it. But I love that, because I was a lurker too, a couple years ago when I first started, and so and now I've grown in that. So.
And I like how you said just to follow 5 people. When I would lead PD on how to use Twitter for your own growth, I actually showed them 5 people that I thought would be good for just educators in general. These are 5 people you should follow, and then I would take the 5 or 6 people in our district that were the most active so that they would have people local, and then they could see also the bigger, more global picture of building that PLN through Twitter. But you're right. You get comfortable through lurking, I think, before you actually dive in, most people.
Well, and I think to expand our perspectives beyond just our buildings or just our districts is so important. And so that is definitely a value added in, you know, being a member on Twitter, is that no longer am I just sharing my ideas among the 7 people in my, you know, English department. You know, I have a broader audience, and so I think that that obviously has a lot of value, hopefully to folks that are getting started.
The one thing that I really liked from what Janelle was shared was that you have to be mindful of your purpose. Why are you bringing this tool, this method of communicating into the learning experience? And more importantly, really being respectful of the amount of information that you could be sharing and the amount of interactions that you could be creating, because if they're not really purposeful, that does tend to compound lots of the issues that people are worried about, distractions, lack of time, that sort of thing. And so I'm just curious, and we'll do this really quickly because we only have 3 minutes left in our allotted panel time, and I know Janelle needs to leave early. How would you introduce, or how have you introduced social media into the classroom, or how have you supported others in doing this?
Do you mind if I go first?
Absolutely, go ahead.
Okay, and I already shared a little bit, but I was curriculum director at a small district, so that means I did a lot of everything. And doing the professional development and tech integration was a major part of my job as we went one-to-one in 2013. But so I led a lot of professional development, and a lot of it was focused on tech integration. And we would do whole PD time on Twitter. And so the way I would introduce it was, 1, just showing them how they could use it for their personal learning. And then 2, how it could be applicable in the classroom. And so then the teachers that were ready for that, one in particular, he would have his bell work would be a question he would have written on the board, and their class had their own personal hashtag. And so as the kids came in, they got on their iPads, they responded to whatever the question was, and it was always something to do with that day's learning, not a review, but more of a like, what do you think this is going to have to do with, or how do you think this is related to our learning that we've done before? So then they would have to respond and use that class specific hashtag. And so it would get the kids using Twitter. It taught them how to use hashtags as a channel to learn that. And then it also got them thinking about the lesson for the day. And I loved that. It was very simple. It was more of a substitution of things that they were already doing. And yet it was more streamlined. It took less time because then he just had his the hashtag up and had that streaming on the projector screen, so the kids could automatically see what everybody else was responding, and he could just choose a couple of them at the beginning of the class to get started. And this was a social studies teacher, and it worked very well in his classroom. But so as far as how I introduced it, I did a lot of and work it into the classroom.
That's great. And you know, one of the things I love about the hashtag for a teacher, if they have multiple classes, as a former language arts teacher myself, to have my first period and my sixth period be able to still communicate with each other, because you know they're not going to do that in the halls between classes. Maybe second and third period would, but not first and sixth. And it's just neat that they can go back to that hashtag and see what other people in different classes are getting out of a discussion. So love that idea. Janelle, if you have to take off, I completely understand. So glad that you are with us. Thank you, and hope to see you in other Geekouts.
Thank you. This was awesome.
Thanks, Janelle.
Bye.
And Dr. Ho is back again. He had to send us a private message, and we're totally understanding that sometimes things just don't work out the first time around. That's what we're doing this for. It's part of our digital learning experience. Are you able to say something now with us? Tom, can you hear us?
Can you hear me? Can
Yes,
you hear me?
you
Yes.
can. Yes.
Yeah. Hey, sorry. I forgot all about the being next door to the band room, and so somebody started drumming. I went next door, and they said they're okay. They're done now.
It gave us a little entertainment. Nothing wrong with that. So everyone's had a chance to introduce themselves, and we do have a few minutes for our Q&A, and it doesn't look like we have one viewer, but I haven't seen any questions come up yet. And we do have one question left for our panel, but Tom, do you want to tell anyone who's tuning in a little bit about yourself and your perspective on this topic?
Yeah. Well, so anyway, I'm back home again in Indiana, and while I was in Florida the last 4 years, I was trying to get my school district on there to just try something to try to pick up on what I had still been doing when I was at IUPUI. Yes, I'm a refugee from higher ed. And so anyway, now I'm at Traders Point Christian Academy, and whereas to basically crowdsource our public relations through social media. And I'm starting that primarily right now with the administrative staff, and eventually hope to enlist the teachers, and then eventually the whole school community in that effort.
Excellent. Well, let me throw this last question out to the panel, even though we had to let Janelle go. Since we don't have an audience question, if you had a piece of advice that you wanted to give a teacher who was just starting down this path of introducing social media into their classroom, what might that be?
I think my first piece of advice would be to have a spirit of adventure, because you know, we all make mistakes, and we all have things that don't go exactly to plan and like that. But the benefits that I've seen by using social media in the classroom have far outweighed the sort of learning curve that you face in the process. And I think one of the things that maybe frightens people who are just starting on the path is just the fear that it is so public. But the reality is that, you know, the ocean of social media is so broad that it's not as public as you feel it is, and your mistakes, and it's a very forgiving community, generally speaking, especially in the sort of education pockets of social media.
Great advice. Would either of you like to add something to that?
I'll chime in. I guess I would just say, you know, just try. That seems to be what stops people, is just not being willing to try. And if an old guy like me is willing to try, anybody else ought to be able to.
But I should say sage advice. Molly, what advice would you give yourself? You do tweet with your students, but you're not necessarily using it in your classroom. What would be some things that you think might be ways to start dreaming about using social media in class? Not that I'm putting pressure on you.
Yeah. You know, I really liked the idea, and I mean, it's not a new idea, but of using the class hashtag and just kind of starting your day with that that question to kind of get the thoughts flowing about what you're going to do that day, or you know what your discussions. My kids do. Well, last semester we didn't do as much. It was a strictly writing course. It was like a W131 type of writing course, so it's pretty structured, and you know there's not a lot of time for extra, and oftentimes not even the stuff I'd want. But this semester we are doing our literature course. And so it is fairly structured, but with reading literature comes a lot more discussion and things like that. So I have been looking for, we just started, we're getting ready to start a new unit, and we're just finishing the first paper. So I'm trying to find some related articles and links and things like that to share out for my kids, you know, via social media to kind of get the discussion started. My problem is that I only have maybe half of my kids on social media, and so whatever I do, you know, if I tweet something or share something on Twitter, I have to do it as well, you know, in our learning management system. And so it's nice for those kids who are on Twitter because they can get it where they choose to get that information or that communication from me. But I still feel like often I'm stuck, um, you know, in my learning management system for the majority of what we do in class, just because I don't want to require anyone to join. That's not my place. Maybe their parents don't want them to. Some of them have no interest in joining, you know. So it's, that's why I typically stick to just kind of informal, you know, communication with my kids, praising them, wishing them happy birthdays, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Hey, we missed you in class today, kind of thing. Just to let them know that, you know, we're thinking about you, or I thought of you today, you know, which helps with that building relationships. But I don't know. I honestly,
You actually gave a really great piece of advice. Know where your students are and where they feel comfortable communicating.
Yeah.
Be full of parents, you know, preferences, and open up that dialogue for the values. And I think also the fact that you're willing to duplicate a message in multiple places, you know, really says a lot. So those were excellent pieces of advice. Thank you.
I was going to add to that. Because Molly, you reminded me of a great lesson that I saw a teacher do a couple of years ago, actually, with Twitter. That they were live tweeting as they read a novel, as if they were a member of the people experiencing the events that were in the novel. And the students who had Twitter were welcome to do that. The students who didn't were welcome to tweet on paper.
Oh, there you go.
Because really the purpose of the lesson was not about the platform, but about the experience of empathizing and like that. And it was a remarkable lesson. I mean, it was worth the teacher's time. And one of the things that I guess the other piece of advice sometimes that I find myself giving teachers is to listen to the students, to involve the students in the decision about when social media is a good fit for what you're doing in the classroom. Because a lot of times students will bring that to the table as well. And it's really less about utilizing a new platform as it is about, like you said, connecting on multiple levels and letting people communicate with you where they are. And sometimes you just get this magical thing that happens. You know, you have a bunch of kids who are on Instagram who, you know, who harness the power of Instagram to a purpose that's happening in your classroom. And it's not so much about saying to everybody, use Instagram. Yeah. It's about saying to the people who are using Instagram, it's okay to use Instagram.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
I think that is the perfect place to wrap it up today. I think the permission piece, you know, the idea that we are open to different ways of doing the same thing, and we're always open to new ways of doing what we've always done, right? The idea of transforming, rethinking, how do we show our learning? How do we access information? And that's the exciting part about social media. There are lots of other things to consider, but if we keep that in the forefront of our minds, it's a worthy discussion. And I really appreciate all of you being here for the discussion today. Those of you who have tried to tune in or are catching this in the archive, thank you for joining us today. If you want to learn more about the Office of eLearning's Digital Learning Month, which is happening throughout February and into March as far as our Geekouts, you can go to www.boe.in.gov/elearning, and you'll see the Indiana Loves Digital Learning icon. Click on that, and it will take you to all of our events. You can also follow us, of course, on Twitter at INELearn, and you can find us on Google Plus with bit.ly/INELearn, capital G plus. And so thank you guys again for being willing to learn with me today and to share your experiences and your insights around social media in the classroom.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate you all.
Thank you. It was fun.
Yeah.
Good.
We'll see you later.
We'll try this again another time. Bye, all.